Hi, everyone. My name is David Fulford, and I'm the CEO here at IPAC. And I realize that a number of people are just logging on right now. So I'm just going to give everybody a minute just to get in, and then we're going to start right away. Okay, so thank you very much for joining us. As I mentioned, my name is David Fulford. I'm the CEO here at IPAC, and I have an opportunity every week to interact with public sector leaders across Canada. And I can tell you confidently that the number one issue that they raise with me is artificial intelligence. And what are governments doing about it? What are different organizations? How are they preparing? So today's session, hopefully, is going to be practical for you and also insightful. I do want to start with a land acknowledgement. So with participants joining virtually from coast to coast, we acknowledge and respect the ancestral and unceded territories of all First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people. We encourage everyone here to take the opportunity to learn about the diverse and unique histories, cultures, and aspirations of the peoples on whose territories you work and live. We also encourage you to determine how you can take action towards reconciliation. So take a moment and use the chat feature to let us know where you're participating from. And if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. We will have time at the end to provide for some questions. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Olivier Chaton. Olivier is a senior tech specialist in the modern workplace area of Microsoft, and he's going to provide a demonstration for you that I think you will find very practical. Olivier, over to you.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you everyone for joining us today. So at Microsoft, we started the journey of generative AI a few months ago, actually more than a year and a half ago now. And the main thing I want to present to you today is Copilot for Microsoft 365, which is a solution of bringing generative AI to individuals in the workplace, embedded in their productivity. So what I'm mentioning and talking about is we want to be able to use generative AI while we are working in our day-to-day activities as an employee. So as an example, you want to be able to use Copilot within Outlook. So you know that email thread that everyone receives once in a while, where you have content, and that on the top of that email thread, you're told, hey, what's your opinion on that? So that's what you see on the screen. Hopefully everyone sees it. And what you see on the screen is an email thread, and we have summary by Copilot embedded into the tool that you use and that everybody uses today. So basically what we are saying is, I want Copilot to be able to create a summary of those emails so that I can make up my mind and create an answer for that email thread. I want to save time. So it's an assistant, a generative AI-based assistant that helps me with looking at the content and finding the important information that lies within those emails. So that's the first step. The second step, once you have done that, is to reply all to the email and create the content. So you have the option to write the email yourself, obviously, but you also have the option to use the function called draft by Copilot or draft with Copilot. So at the end of the day, what you want to do is send information and instructions to Copilot so that it creates the answer for you. So as an example, I can say, hey, congratulate everyone and ask for a follow-up meeting to review the project schedule, as an example. And then as a second instruction, I want to say, hey, write that email in English and then in French, because Copilot is really good at languages. So let's do that. And then I have a toggle that where I can set the tone of my email and the length of my email. Casual and long is good for me right now, so I'm going to keep that this way. And then I ask to generate the answer. So Copilot will look through the email thread, gather the content, and create an answer for me that I'm capable of tweaking afterwards, because at the end of the day, it's just the first draft. It's not the final answer, and it shouldn't be the final answer. It's something that I can start working with and then alter either by using Copilot, again, another set of toggles where I can change the tone and the length and send instructions. I'm going to keep it for now. And then what you can see here is I have actually both versions of the email in both languages as I ask for. So that's good. The next feature I want to show you is around coaching by Copilot. So you know those emails where you're told to keep them in the draft items and look through them a few times before they send them, before it could be damaging, right? So we want to have Copilot to review that email and give an opinion on the tone, the sentiment, and the clarity of the email. So basically, it gives indication on how your email will be perceived to help you with crafting a better email. So it's your email, but it gives an opinion on that. So we used the capacity of Copilot to summarize information. We use the capacity of Copilot to create content, and then we use the capacity of Copilot to analyze information and give an opinion on that. So that's kind of really helpful and really interesting. So that's the first step through Copilot and using Copilot within the email. The second one I want to show you is within the Word context. So you have the ability to use Copilot to do actions on existing content. So I can select the text as an example and ask Copilot. So I have the ability to send an instruction and say, hey, transform this into a table as an example. So I can ask Copilot to do actual changes to the format of my text. That's the first step you can do with Copilot. So it started and it looked at the data in the bullet points and extracted the columns and the content of the columns according to the bullet points. So I'm going to stop that for now. The next step you might be able to do as well is looking at the document you have there. You're able to ask Copilot to summarize the document. But what if I ask the instruction in French? Résume-moi ce document. So Copilot understands both English and French, and depending on the instructions you send, it will react accordingly. So what I'm saying is, by asking the question in French, the summary should be in French. So it's leveraging the content in English of that document, but giving me a summary in French so that I can leverage that in my mother tongue and start working more appropriately in a language I'm better suited to understand, as you might hear in my accent. So let's finish it up. It's doing its stuff. It's taking just a couple of seconds. It's not that long. But basically, the intent and the idea is to work through the content of that document and provide with the answers in the language of the prompt I sent. So like I said, the content is in French, but what you have to notice as well is it's giving references as a transparency measure. So we want to be sure that AI is not just a black box, so that you have the information, but you also have where the data was taken from in the document in order to create that information. Really, really important for Microsoft to make it transparent so you have full control over the information. Another important note, we outlined that content generated by AI might be incorrect. That's why we called it a Copilot. The human being behind the keyboard is in control of the information, and we are responsible for the content. It's not the AI responsibility. So be warned that you have to check and do spot checks on what the AI is doing. It might be incorrect. That's the nature of the tool. So that's from a word perspective. Now on to the scenario where I use what we call a chat. So you might be familiar with that about something called ChatGPT. You might have experienced that. So I'm going to send a prompt that I have in a basic notepad right away, actually. So I want to look at 3 documents. So 3 reports that were downloaded from the internet. For the sake of it, I just transferred them to a Word document, and I'm going to use the / command to attach them to the prompt. So I'm attaching the documents as a reference for the prompt. So I'm going to attach the 3 of them. I just start typing them, and it finds them in my internal content. By the way, this is from an enterprise perspective. It's internal to the company. It's not going to the internet. And then I'm adding the last one. And I'm asking Copilot to check those 3 documents and provide me with the top 5 most impactful statistics and metrics from those documents. And I give instructions on how I want the output to be structured. So I want a table because it's more legible than a blurb of text. And basically, Copilot will open up those 3 documents, look through the content, and provide me with the information I'm asking for. So that's the kind of things that we're capable of doing, to ask opinions and ask for analysis of content and have a summary of what the documents are actually containing. So you see that it's very legible, very easy to understand. And then a further question, I asked Copilot to look through through each document and provide me with the recommendations they might have embedded. So it's providing me exactly what I was looking for, and I can then copy paste that and use that content for my consumption. Because it's a chat, we actually have the opportunity to continue the conversation. So what I'm saying is, I started something with content, and I can continue that conversation and ask another question. So I'm going to ask another question and say, based on the above information and documents provided, what could the federal government of Canada do, both internally and externally, to position itself as the global leader in AI? So what I'm asking Copilot to do is provide me with recommendations, so its opinion, so I can not start from from ground zero. Basically, the idea is to prevent the blank page syndrome and start from something and evolve from that. The concept really here is to start from maybe 40-60% of the job done, so you can continue and improve. So the idea is to get faster to the first iteration, so that you can use the time you saved to improve the quality of the output you're producing. So that's what the kind of stuff we are doing right there. So it's finding recommendation and potential impact with the reference from where it took the content. So you see, it went onto the internet, it went onto content and documents to find the appropriate answer to what I'm looking for. So hopefully that helps you with understanding what Copilot is about. And on to the next presentation.
Good day. My name is Fortin LeFaivre, and I am the Vice President of Strategic Policy and Global Partnership at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. So I'm very pleased to be with you moderating this very impressive lineup of experts to speak about AI adoption in the context of the public sector. I should first start by saying that at the Canadian Chamber, the link between AI and productivity is something that we have been focusing on almost for the last year now. And specifically last month, we led a business delegation to Rome, Italy, in the context of the B7. And the B7 is short for Business 7. It's one of the main engagement groups related to the G7 that took place in Italy just recently. At that event, the topic of AI from a business context was one of the main themes, no surprise there. We, in fact, hosted our own event in Italy related to this very topic. And as we take on the presidency, we being Canada, in 2025, the G7 presidency, the Canadian Chamber will be taking on the B7, Business 7 presidency as well. And there's no question that AI, in terms of its potential to increase productivity and economic growth and efficiency, will definitely be at the forefront again of discussions. Regardless of the sector and also regardless of the policy topic, AI is almost relevant to everything. So with that in mind, today we'll be delving into, specifically the potential benefits, but also, the barriers to adoption in the context of the Canadian government and public service. I also want to point out that there are, many recent reports that have come out on that topic that go deeper in terms of, what are the benefits, what are the barriers. And specifically, Marlene Floyd, who is here from Microsoft, will be speaking about the report that her company has recently released just a few weeks ago on that topic. And the Canadian Chamber has also put out a similar report. And there have been others as well. So you'll see that the panelists will likely be referencing those reports, and I'm sure we can make them available to the audience as well, because there's some definitely very good findings. And what's really interesting is that as these reports come out in the span of about 4 weeks, they all kind of confirm the same thing, that there is huge benefits to AI adoption in a responsible way. And this is especially relevant in the Canadian context as we, we continue to struggle with our national productivity. So today we are joined by probably the most relevant people on this topic here. So it's a thrill to have them here. We'll be speaking to Christiane Fox, who's the Deputy Clerk of the Privy Council and Associate Secretary to the Cabinet for the Government of Canada. By Dominic Rochon, Deputy Minister and Chief Information Officer of Canada, and Marlene Floyd, Senior National Director, Corporate Affairs, Microsoft Canada. So we will start with questions for our panelists, and we'll build on those, and there will be an opportunity at the end for the audience to pose questions. So feel free to put your questions in the chat. So we'll get things started right away so you can hear directly from the experts. So I'm going to jump right in to make perhaps the key findings of your report, Marlene, because I think this is the number that jumps out the most when you read the report. And it claims that with Gen AI we could generate $187 billion in economic value for the Canadian economy by 2030. Can you unpack that? Because that's a lot of money. That's a bold claim. And what would it mean in real terms for a Canadian worker, and maybe specifically for a member of the public service? Marlene? Oh, Marlene, you're on mute.
Of course I am. It's 4 years into post-COVID world and virtual meetings, and we still have mute problems. So first off, thank you everyone for joining us today. At Microsoft, obviously, we believe in the responsible adoption of AI, and Gen AI has been this new technology that has really taken the world by storm. So over the last couple of months, what we did is we worked with Accenture to produce an economic report trying to quantify what did this actually mean for the Canadian economy. And what we were able to pull through that economic analysis is that if Canadian firms and governments and organizations were to adopt generative AI at just a moderate level, that we could see $187 billion annually to the Canadian economy, and 180 billion of those in productivity gains. That would save workers about 125 hours per year, which, to put that in perspective, is about a half hour each working day. So you saw what Olivier just showed us, which was like how you can use this. And I think there's a perception out there that AI, is going to take all of these tasks and automate everything. But what we actually found was that we analyzed 19,000 tasks that are associated with all the different jobs in Canada. Of those, only 14 of those tasks, so once again, not jobs, tasks, could be actually automated. That means that generative AI could automate that task. 24% could be augmented, like Olivier just showed us with his emails or summarizing report, putting something together. But that with that augmentation, meaning that a human still needs to be in the loop. Generative AI is a tool, it's a co-pilot. And so I would like to add, it's not about replacing jobs, but it's certainly going to help you improve your job. Now, how did we go into this report? We've all heard about Canada's lagging productivity problems. The Deputy Governor of the Bank of Canada has stated that it's an economic emergency, that Canada lags the OECD and the G7. Our labor productivity has fallen in 6 of the last 7 quarters. And what we're able to see is that with that productivity gain, we could actually increase in Canada our productivity levels by 8% over the next 10 years. That's a huge amount. And once again, to put that in perspective, since 2015, that amount has risen by 0.6%. So in Canada, our productivity has gone on that high, has only gone up 0.6%. But if we could just get some adoption of AI, we can actually start moving the marker on what that means for productivity in this country. The report went on to further, we broke it down even further, saying, what does that mean for healthcare? Well, it means probably about $13 billion in value being added to the economy just by healthcare by 2030. $14 billion worth for public sector and government. Now, what the real key here is that, you know, there's an opportunity that Canada can grasp upon. Everyone has heard about how AI advantage that we have. We have some of the best researchers in the world that Canada has produced. We have startups and we have these companies that are building products here in Canada. So how do we see this opportunity? So some of the key challenges that we have and where our report went into is, I'm going to say it's into two big things. One is that the biggest challenge to adoption of Gen AI is increasing public trust. Public trust in Canada of AI in Canada is low. Just about 31% of Canadians trust AI, 23 points lower than the global average. That, when you couple it with the fact that only about 8-9% of firms in Canada are actually using Gen AI, and only 73% of Canadian business are even considering using Gen AI, we have a problem. We have a problem because we have this huge opportunity, but until we can increase public trust so that we can have greater adoption, we're not going to be able to see that opportunity. So today, part of the reason for doing this is to showcase, what does Gen AI do for you in your day-to-day life, and how can you be using it? It is this great tool that can help you augment and can help you is being able to help you with those small tasks that you don't want to do each and every day. I always say the best tool that I found with the Copilot is actually on the Teams function, where it summarizes the end of my meeting with all the action items and what we discussed, saving me a half hour easily each day that I have where I need to send notes out to my colleagues at the end of a meeting. And I think it's really getting in and understanding what this technology can do, and then kind of really being creative in that adoption. So the report kind of outlined what the opportunities were. The big piece is, how can we increase that public trust? And I do think it's a bit of a flywheel, where public trust will increase if we can get greater adoption, which will then help public trust, which will then help more greater adoption with responsible use of AI. So we will be sharing the report at the end of the session by email, is my understanding. And so we welcome anyone's comments, and we're really pleased that Microsoft was able to provide this level of analysis for Canada so that they can see what the opportunity is.
Thank you for framing the findings of your report, Marlene. That's really helpful. And I can see that a lot of people are asking for those reports that we're referencing, including in the Microsoft report, the Chamber report, there's an RBC report. Like, there are several reports coming out that are tackling different facets, but generally are about AI and Gen AI adoption, and it's linked to, you know, productivity. So I know that we will be putting up those links so you can take a look. And I should add that they're all very easily digestible, which is nice. They're not like highly academic bricks. And I just want to point out, I love your example about the meeting summary. I know that we've used it in the past when we've had meetings, and it's just such a beautiful thing to see it just generate it. And it's oftentimes much better than you and I would just do ourselves. And if you can think of all the meetings that take place across the government of Canada, I know there are very few, but if you can think of just quantifying that benefit, like that in itself is probably a game changer, right? If you're saving 20 minutes or half an hour. So I'm going to move on to the CIO of the Government of Canada and Deputy Minister, Dominic Rochon, because this is all really in your wheelhouse. So really curious to see, as you're digesting these relatively new reports, the link seems to be clear about the benefits in adopting AI in a workplace setting. Now we're talking about, taking it a step further, and what about adopting it in a government setting? And it's not easy to adopt new big game changers like that. And certainly there, you could see how there'd be a lot of benefits to augmenting the service delivery to Canadians if this is adopted fully. So as the CIO of the Government of Canada, what is your team working on to enhance adoption across the public service?
Thank you, and merci beaucoup pour l'invitation d'être ici. It's a real pleasure to be among you, and needless to say, I'm probably going to touch on a lot of the same themes that Marlene touched on with regard to public trust when it comes to adoption. What my team has been working on, there's a tremendous amount, and frankly, we don't have enough time to really go through all of the different aspects. I try and paint a very easy picture of what the Office of the CIO for the federal government works on, and I put it in buckets under policy, under technology, and under people. And in each of those areas, we're doing a lot. Policy in terms of setting the guidelines, technology in terms of dealing with the interoperability of these new tools and the technical debt that's required. And then on the policy side, on the people side, there's also upskilling. So there are 3 buckets of work, and there's an enormous amount of things that go in that. But in terms of answering your question, maybe if you could indulge me for a second, maybe I can speak a little bit on the opportunities that the advent of generative AI now is presenting to us before I get to some challenges, which I think the challenges will speak specifically to what we're trying to tackle in the immediate term. Clearly, hopefully everyone understands that AI isn't something new. We've been working on AI for decades, frankly. Think weather models for government, think genome analysis, think satellite imagery. There's all sorts of things that we've been using AI for. But of course, generative AI now that is readily available on the internet to anybody is very much a game changer. And with that, there are all sorts of opportunities that present themselves for government. And we've already touched on several of them with the opening example that Olivier gave us with walking us through Copilot, and some of the things that Marlene touched on and what's in the Microsoft report. Imagine a world where the productivity of our public servants becomes supercharged, where research and the creation of first drafts, as we see, are no longer daunting tasks, but they're a seamless process aided by AI. This is an opportunity that essentially lies before us, as Olivier pointed out, and illustrated for us. Consider the mundane, repetitive processes that consume so much of our time. AI holds great potential in automating these tasks, freeing up our talented individuals to dedicate themselves to higher value tasks, tasks that require a human touch. So think administrative tasks, but also think writing, editing, translating. All of these things, anything that processes large volumes of data will be able to do that at speeds that we never envisioned before. We also envision deploying in the federal government AI across common government activities. So anyone who works in a public policy setting or a public service setting realizes that we have access to information or privacy requests that we have to answer. HR, finance, procurement, all involve reams and reams of information. And in order to find economies of scale that were previously unimaginable, we're now going to have the opportunity to leverage AI. And as you pointed out, Catherine, you mentioned service delivery. AI can drastically reduce wait times, automate decisions, simplify interactions with the government. It can break down barriers of departmental silos, making it easier for citizens to find the information that they need when they need it. Let me just illustrate a few examples of what government actually uses AI for or is already experimenting when it comes to pilot projects. Because frankly, at this time, there are over half of federal departments and agencies are already using AI. So it's not a question of if they use them, but how these tools are going to allow us to improve outcomes for Canadians. I'll use Department of Fisheries and Oceans. They have a concept, developing a proof of concept rather, to identify marine debris to optimize cleanup efforts. Our Veterans Affairs are determining whether electronic documents are of business value for retention purposes. In terms of research, we have the Public Health Agency of Canada that uses AI to predict the spatial distribution of ticks and pathogen reservoirs, which helps identify geographic areas of potential risk for diseases. Environment and Climate Change Canada has used machine learning to better understand climate and watershed drivers of water quality events such as harmful algal blooms. And Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada is using AI to support research activities such as monitoring environmental and food production systems, developing new approaches to plant and animal breeding, and improving sustainability of greenhouse production. I can go on. There are dozens and dozens of examples where AI is already in use or is being piloted. But to get to the heart of your question about what are we doing to encourage adoption, there are significant challenges with implementing AI. And those challenges, in my head, manifest themselves across 4 categories. First, it's not going to be a surprise to everyone that we have to address a cultural resistance to change. That's what exists when it comes to federal government. People are risk averse. The automatic response to something new or different is often no, don't want to go there. So we can't just change the technology. What we have to do is we have to change the way people see things, the way people are willing to change how they do their jobs. And that is going to be a significant challenge that we're going to have to increase awareness and encourage change management in order for people to embrace the use of AI. The second challenge remains quality and accessibility of data. AI tools are useless unless you have not just good data, but good governance of data. And it can be as simple as having the right amount of data in the right place at the right time to get the answer you're looking for. If you don't have that, ultimately the old cliche of garbage in and garbage out is going to be the downfall. So when it comes to credibility and use, you have to make sure that you have your appropriate data and that it's governed in the right way. And you have to be mindful that there are going to be legislative limitations to how you navigate that data. And there are privacy concerns and sometimes classified information concerns that are going to have to also play in the data challenge bucket. Thirdly, I mentioned earlier, technical debt. Legacy systems are going to prevent the use of AI because it's simply too difficult to embed into inflexible older systems the flexibility required to just leverage all of this new technology. So you need to choose a model, choose a platform, make sure that your technology is interoperable in order to really leverage ultimately what you want. And last thing that I'll touch on in terms of a challenge, which I think is the biggest challenge, is that our focus must be on attracting and upskilling talent, ensuring that our workforce is prepared for the AI-driven future. And it's not just about talent. It also means, back to what Marlene's point was, that we have to earn social license and public trust, without which none of our efforts are ultimately going to succeed. So summarizing an answer to your question, ultimately we're working at increasing awareness and putting in place policies and guidelines on the use of data, around privacy, around technology, around encouraging different departments and agencies to make sure that they have the ecosystem required in order to be able to embrace this new technology. I'll stop there.
Well, thank you, Dominic, for being so specific in terms of how you view the barriers and the opportunities. That's really helpful. It will, some of those will come to no surprise to many of us, but you went into, you went into more specific detail though, and for me that generates more questions. So I can imagine I'm seeing the questions. I know there were a lot of comments from the audience that are agreeing with you and want to know more. So I will circle back on a few of those, perhaps related to the upskilling specifically in a moment, because I know that definitely that's a really key one there. So I'll move on to asking a question to Christiane Fox. Maybe take a step back, given your role is a lot broader than the specific AI adoption. You have the big picture in mind. And speaking of big picture, we often talk on the world stage as Canadians, especially our elected officials, I would say. We often like to boast about our global leadership on AI, right? And arguably that is true if you look at how we're doing, especially regarding research and development, right? Not if you look at specifically commercialization and adoption, then we're far from being global leaders, right? So wondering, as we take on this G7 presidency, we will have a platform, a global platform amongst G7 countries, but arguably amongst many others. What's the opportunity there in terms of AI adoption and helping to bridge the gap between our peers in terms of productivity? What can we do there, and what can the government of Canada and the public service do in terms of leadership?
Merci beaucoup, Catherine, pour la question, puis merci aux panélistes puis aux participants. C'est un vrai plaisir d'être avec vous aujourd'hui. That's a big question. I covered a lot of ground there, so I'll go through maybe a few reflections. I think I would just echo what Marlene and Dominic have said around sort of what the potential opportunity that AI can be for our economy to improve the way we work, to really enhance our lives, to deliver better services in the context of public service. And I do think that Canada is a key player in the AI space. I think our AI talent is significant. It's a key sort of job creator. It's a driver of productivity. And I think we really need to focus on how AI adoption can really increase and solve what has been a productivity challenge for Canada for a long time. So I would agree, we should pay very close attention to Marlene's stats around the benefits and what that can mean for the country. I think it's important. We talk a lot about, the research capacity in this country, but there's over 140,000 actively engaged AI professionals in Canada, and that number is growing every day. 10% of the world's top tier AI researchers are here in this country, the second most in the world. One important fact, we're ranked 1 globally in the growth of women in AI, and first in the G7 for that year-over-year growth of AI talent. So yes, it's research, but it's also jobs, it's incubators, it's investors, it's startup businesses. So we do have a good foundation. Now there's a need to focus on adoption in the SME space. We are lagging in other countries. And I think that it's not just about developing our AI IT workers, it's actually all sectors of our economy. When we think about that in the government context, it's not just our IT professionals and Dominic's teams and talented staff. It's actually our policy advisors. It's our frontline service operators. That's what we need to kind of change the mindset of AI adoption. And I've gone around the country to talk to AI leaders in Canada, research, industry, and it is really interesting, and it's really shaping how we in government are approaching kind of that adoption and creativity within the public sector. And it represents, especially generative AI, a huge potential for us in terms of growth, and I would argue in terms of solving major problems. I spent a big chunk of my career at Indigenous Services Canada working on very complex issues. I was out west meeting with some AI professionals who are looking at AI technology to solve water advisories by remote monitoring. Like these types of solutions to very complex issues will serve us well both within and external to government. And I think we do recognize that we have an opportunity here and government needs to be a part of that through investment. And so I think since 2016, we've invested more than $16 billion to support scientific discovery, develop Canadian research talent, attract those top researchers to the world. And then most recently in budget 2024, we announced over $2 billion to foster growth access into kind of our ecosystem of AI. And so on AI compute, which we heard loud and clear in the context of gaps that were created, we launched public consultations around how do we actually encourage stakeholders to provide input into the process of how do we invest that $2 billion in AI compute and how do we manage that across the country. As government, we have to think about AI in the context of our leadership role in safety and security. Technologies, adoption, and we need to have responsible adoption of AI technologies by Canadians, by Canadian business, but also by the federal government. And so how we regulate in this space is challenging. It's an evolution, it's a fast-changing technology. And so our Artificial Intelligence and Data Act, which was introduced in June, like that looks at regulation in this space, but we have to kind of keep pace with the world. Like we have to think about the trends and the changes. We have to work around, you know, responsible development, the voluntary code of conduct. We've got a lot of major tech firms who are part of this. We need to continue to enable that and work with private sector. And I think that that's why, in addition to the investments into compute, we also felt it was really important to invest into an AI Safety Institute in Canada, have an AI Data Commissioner office, and actually be resourced to kind of think about our role in sort of global partnerships on artificial intelligence and our role within kind of the sector. And so you asked about the G7. I'm super excited about this. The Prime Minister announced that Canada's hosting the next G7 Leaders Summit in Kananaskis in 2025. And so this is an opportunity for us to look at the research capacity in this country, the business development. We can kind of highlight the need for productivity improvements and adoption, but use the G7 platform to look at how are we building our economy, fighting climate change, managing sort of mis and disinformation, and how is AI at the front end of that? How are we leveraging digital technologies? And I think that this is a real opportunity for the federal government, but it's also an opportunity for the country, for FPT collaboration around things like emergency preparedness, healthcare, better service delivery. These are all things that, you know, at all levels of government, we are focused on. And I have to say, in my role here at the PCO, at the Privy Council office, I'm reflecting also on the values and ethics in terms of our work as public servants. I see the link between AI adoption and values and ethics in this conversation that we are having. We're the largest employer in the country. We have ethical obligations to do the right thing for employees, for Canadians. This trust that is placed on us, we have to reflect on how do we actually leverage technology while doing it responsibly by having the proper safeguards to protect, as Dominic mentioned, privacy, to avoid kind of built-in biases. In my time at the Immigration Department, we really reflected on how AI could really support our teams in terms of, you know, getting rid of those tasks that Marlene was reflecting on that are repetitive and aren't really utilizing the talent that we have. But how do we have the right safeguards so that decision makers are actually making immigration decisions? These are real life examples of how our systems need to adopt AI, but do so with the proper safeguards. We also need to be transparent in our use to ensure that we've got the right training in how we deploy it. And so as we think about our leadership role on the global stage, it needs to be informed by our support of what's happening in a broader ecosystem across the country, our responsible use within the federal system, our goal to have service excellence and deploying AI in that capacity, and then having the opportunity to highlight the Canadian talent at next year's G7 will be essential and will be really important in the momentum that we need in this country to drive change. Alors avec ça, je vais m'arrêter et puis j'ai hâte à d'autres questions.
Merci, Christiane. So you mentioned right off the top, you know, that it was important to have the conversation about the positive benefits and the potential, right? And arguably, there's been so many discussions about the negative impacts or the potential negative impacts, which is we can all agree super important and a must in terms of the full conversation. But we can't do it at the expense of not looking at, you know, AI, whether it's Gen AI or an older version of AI, and the tool that it is, right? And it can be used for different means, right? So, you know, I like how you focused on, you know, really taking the opportunity to maybe shift the conversation so that it's, you know, it's balanced, and we're looking at the opportunities for increasing our productivity. I know there are a lot of questions, and we have about 15 minutes left. So maybe I'll just ask this question open-ended, because I think it's important to have use cases so people can visualize, you know, what's been done and maybe what can be done in their workplace or on the projects that they're working on. And so maybe I'll start with Marlene, if you can quickly tell us. I know that that Microsoft works with a lot of governments across, you know, all over the world, including many provinces and municipalities. And are there any kind of use cases where, you know, it's AI was used in a government setting and you know, the project materialized and it was positive? And I'd open the question to afterwards to Christiane and Dominic too, if you have some examples that you'd like to quickly share before we go to the Q&A.
I'd be happy to, and I'll give a really quick example. Obviously, value to citizens is, you know, as public servants, what you're trying to provide good citizen services, but we can also have quality and job satisfaction that increases where we allow people to focus on the impactful tasks. So I'm going to talk about one example. It's actually at the municipal level in the city of Kelowna. So as we know, housing crisis in this country, we cannot build homes fast enough. Big part of that is how can we get permits out so that we can build more homes, so that we can get those pieces out. This was something the city of Kelowna was grappling with. They were finding that their building and permits team was spending a lot of time answering the same questions over and over and over again regarding bylaws, regarding codes. So they actually built into their application process so that when the citizen is now filling out a permit, that they're actually filling it out correctly with the code information coming up and answering it for them, where perhaps they're not meeting a specific bylaw, and those questions can be answered via a chatbot, so that it allows the employees at the city of Kelowna to actually get permits out faster because the applications they're receiving are correct. But two, it allows them to focus on the much more higher impact type of or complex files, therefore making their jobs better. They're not answering the same question over and over. And when I use that example, because I think often when we think about AI adoption, we think about broad scope across government, we need to implement and blah, 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 like all the different elements, where if you just find where there's something broken in the process, and can AI be used in that small piece in order to alleviate the strain, to increase citizen services, to increase job satisfaction? I think that's where we have to start looking. It doesn't have to be broad scope across a government agency. It can actually just be using and applying it to small tasks in your day-to-day life that make your job easier and make you appreciate citizen services and being able to provide that to citizens in a more impactful way. So that is my example. So shout out to the city of Kelowna for great work of implementing AI to help with the housing crisis.
It's a really relevant example. Dominic?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I tried to give some examples, and I'll end with one that's more service oriented. But let me frame it as following. There are lots of examples where federal public servants can use AI for various tasks, as we mentioned earlier. And then you have departments and agencies that are looking at, for example, we provide regulations to people have to abide by certain regulations that departments and agencies set. Fisheries and Oceans, for example, developed a proof of concept that uses vessel tracking data to help detect incidents of non-compliance with fishing regulations. You've got regulatory operations and enforcement branch at Health Canada that has used machine learning to create risk models for medical devices and clinical compliance programs based on historical data. So they use risk scores that are assigned to industry sites and categorized to help them with their inspections. So there's a whole series of uses that come into play. And on the services front, of course, we have Employment and Social Development Canada that are doing a bunch of things and experimenting with AI to increase the efficiency of administrative processes, such as automatically assessing the relevance of comments in record of employment forms. We're exploring, and there's a significant effort across the federal public service in terms of how do we offer services to Canadians and how we can better do that. Think passports, think boating licenses. There's all sorts of things where generative AI can come into play. But there's a risk-benefit analysis that needs to be done. I mentioned the rule book and the guidelines that we've been already putting in place. Since back in 2019, we introduced a directive on automated decision-making, which requires algorithmic impact assessments be done if there's going to be an impact on humans, on an individual. And you have to do that in order to be able to adopt the generative AI. So you need to understand exactly how it's going to impact. And then, of course, you've got to make sure that you have all of your data in place in order to be able to frame it appropriately and make sure that it ultimately comes out with the types of services and answers that you want. So all this to say, there's a lot going on. There might even be a few examples that I know immigration was working on that when Chris was there. So I don't know if Chris, off the top of her head, may have a couple of other examples from the federal public service she might want to add.
Thank you very much. I think first off, I would say that one of the efforts across the public service is looking at these kind of pockets of examples and trying to actually make them share them across the system, because there are some that have applications. And we don't need to reinvent the wheel in every department. We need to be creative about problem solving and looking at particular issues. But there are things that can be applied in the regulatory space, as Dom and Marlene indicated, that can be applied across the board. And then there's kind of the internal stuff, translation, ATIP, correspondence. Like, we have a lot of work in this space that every single department does. So adoption in one of these areas can be spread across departments. I would agree with Don, like immigration has looked at a lot of AI and kind of AI technologies in terms of decision-making, of backlog, kind of categorizing so that we can have better service delivery, because we are able to get information into kind of a frame where officers can simply go in and make the decision with all the information before them. We're using it in our pay system backlog. We've had many challenges, as you all know. AI is actually proven to be a solution to some of these issues. And the last example I would give that really touches me in terms of what it means for people. We've just invested into kind of a AI healthcare unit that will be actually housed in Whitecap, Dakota First Nation, just outside of Saskatoon. That hub, that healthcare hub using AI technologies, will deliver remote healthcare to newborn and maternal health. We do a lot of flying people in and out of community for healthcare needs. With AI technologies, mothers will be able to stay within their homes and get healthcare on maternal health. And we tested this out in certain communities, and having people stay within their families, having the ability to get quality healthcare on reserve, has led to significant improvements in maternal and newborn health. So we need to kind of leverage these technologies and apply them to cases where we can serve Canadians better.
All great examples, very concrete. Thank you so much. Well, tons of questions here. It sounds like we could talk about this all day. Maybe we should do this again. Maybe we could do at the B7 that Canada's hosting next year. I don't know. So I will rapid fire a couple of these questions because I think they're important. Maybe I'll designate one person to answer, but if somebody else wants to jump in, that's okay too. But maybe try to keep your answers relatively short so we can get to a few of them. So we've obviously highlighted a lot of the positive aspects of adoption. I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit with this question from Jessica. She says, as AI is intended to increase productivity, it is likely to lead to the belief that more work can be completed in less time. How will employers balance the expectations of workloads, employees' well-being, and work-life balance? We know those are very important questions. So Christiane, maybe I'll throw that over to you.
Okay, absolutely. And I'll be quick because then I want to hear from other panel members. But I think that really the way we're trying to approach this conversation, it's actually not about working longer, doing more, producing more. It's actually about how do you leverage the talent you have? And, you know, I was speaking with someone about their kind of adoption and this kind of fear within the system about being replaced or being overworked. And the reality is the conversation needs to start kind of team by team saying, what are the things that you do every day that you hate? And let's take those things away and let's actually give you the things that bring meaning and impact into your day-to-day. And actually, it's not about giving you a ton more. It's about giving you more so you can have impact. And I think that's the way we have to tackle this conversation. So it's not about loading up more, but if you can do more substantive work, that's what we're trying to achieve. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, and maybe I can just quickly jump in and say I agree wholeheartedly. It's not, and I think what we've seen is, you know, with this report that we put is like the automation of this is minimal, but what it's going to be able to do is to give you greater satisfaction, so you're not doing the tasks you don't like to do. So we did GitHub, I believe, did a survey with coders, and their job satisfaction actually went up by the use of generative AI in the coding practice, because they said that coding, I am not a coder, but that it's like the basics are pretty boring. They don't want to do that. So Gen AI took that element away from them, and then they got to do the more complex, interesting things of their job, and they actually had greater job satisfaction after using AI.
Thanks, Marlene. Dominic, if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in with another question that's more specific to you. An anonymous question here. Is the idea to roll out AI across departments in a relatively uniform fashion with a central lead, or is this more of a case-by-case basis? And yeah, I'll stop it there. But I think you get the idea of like, how does the rollout look like? What can departments expect?
Listen, that's a great question. And truth be told, as I was mentioning earlier, the challenges that exist, not every department and agency is created equal. And what I mean by created equal is some of them have reams and reams of data, and they've been managing it in a responsible way, and therefore they're ready to be able to apply that data to these new tools. Similarly, some departments and agencies have dealt with their legacy systems, have already new platforms and models in place that will also be interoperable with these tools, whereas other departments and agencies have to play catch up with some of the legacy systems that they have in place. So it's back to something that Christiane said. The truth of the matter is there are all sorts of things that are happening, and what we really need to do is make sure that we're enabling the sharing of lessons learned, so that as different departments and agencies are achieving success, we don't do very well in the federal government at trumpeting our successes, but my goodness, does the media do a great job of hammering home whenever we fail, and that just ends up splashing spectacularly across everyone's social media, so that everyone thinks that the federal government just can't possibly adopt these new tools and do anything technologically speaking. Nothing can be further from the truth. So we already have Government of Canada AI workshops in place. We have the Chief Data Officer Council, where they bring people together and are comparing notes. So hopefully departments and agencies are plugging in. But the last thing I'll say on this is it's not just the federal government thing. We need to get better at collaborating and partnering with academia, with other federal, provincial, territorial jurisdictions, municipal jurisdictions, because we're all embracing these things at the same time. We can all be learning from each other. And so it's not a one size fits all. There will be guidelines and tools to help along the way, but everyone's going to have to find their own rhythm in order to be able to adopt this. And of course, there's also the challenge of upskilling. Some departments and agencies have some skills already available, some don't, and the culture change and change management is going to be more prevalent in some departments compared to others.
Thanks, Dominic. And that was one of my questions, and just time flew away. So perhaps we can continue on for further session. And I would just add in terms of, stakeholder collaborations, of course, being from the Canadian Chamber, we certainly hope that business and the private sector can be a big part of that equation, because I think there's a lot of keen companies in Canada that really want to help with the digital transformation in general, and specifically with AI adoption as well. So I know it's a long weekend. People are eager to get their long weekend started. So thank you very much, Christiane Fox, Marlene Floyd, Dominic Rochon, and all the folks at IPAC for organizing this. And the recording will be available, and so will the links to the reports that we mentioned. So thank you very much for this great discussion. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Happy Canada Day.
Happy Canada Day.
Many thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.